Becoming One is a group couples counseling program that is conducted by faith leaders with couples. These faith leaders are trained and given materials and guides to use with the couples on 4 thematic areas: and communication, finance, sexual intimacy, and respect. The program is conducted across 14 weeks, where faith leaders meet couples once a week for 90 minutes to take them through these thematic areas. We've piloted the program in Uganda, we piloted in the northern Uganda, and then did an RCT in the western, and we are currently scaling up the program.
We are currently scaling Becoming One in Uganda, and we, as a result of scaling up the program in the country, it is reaching more than 10,000 couples. And in terms of adapting and contextualizing it into new contexts, we're currently doing that in Kenya.
When we started out in the inception phase, we knew there were a lot of precedents. It was a new territory to explore, so we embarked on a human-centered design to understand what was already happening, how couples were solving their problems, and we learned that the default strategy for couples, in case they had challenges in their relationships, was to go to their faith leaders, spouses. And so we knew that faith leaders already had the moral authority over the couples, so we wanted to leverage an already existing relationship to use it for the programs. We learned from these interactions that faith leaders were really important to the couples' lives, and they were already an existing system. So some of the challenges we faced on the program range back to the pilot itself, where we had a pushback on working with a religious institution and working with a church, because we were cautioned and we sort of knew this, that church is patriarchal. But we knew, as I said initially when we did the HCD, that couples were already using the faith leaders as their support, as their default for relationship challenges. So we knew we had to work with the church and be intentional and deliberate and using them for positive impact as opposed to reinforcing negative norms. And the HCD processes solved our challenge in a way that we had to create a program, again, because it was really at the core system of the faith leaders' beliefs, that could be used for positive impact. And this is how we resolved that challenge. We also had, along the way, we had denominations that were not comfortable with, including unofficially married couples, couples who have not gone through the church to legalize their marriages. So there was a pushback around that, and they wanted to keep Becoming One only focused on legally married couples. And how we engaged, how we went about this is to have really strategic meetings with especially the high-ranking church officials to talk to them about inclusivity, encouraging them around how these vulnerable couples in this case would really need the program. And in the end it worked out. I mean, slowly, but it did work out.
And I think in terms of that challenge that Jackie has spoken about, like including married versus cohabiting couples, we are taking that into consideration when we're scaling Becoming One into new contexts, just having those early on conversations with our implementing partner World Vision, just to try to evaluate or assess the possibilities of including both legally married couples as well as those who are not considered legally married.
And the last challenge, which I believe cuts across several interventions that aim to bring both man and woman on the table. In the beginning, one of the things we learned really early was how we advertise the program. And we intentionally, and this is something we learned also when we do mention violence program and all that, the men are already scared and turns them off because they're already labeled and they are the perpetrators of violence. So they feel like it's a program that is going to attack them. So in our advertising, in our messaging, in the content of the program, we did not mention anything about violence, but rather a program that was intended to improve the relationships of couples. That's how we went about it. That's how we are still going about it.
In Kenya, just again, based on lessons learned and the challenges that we experienced in Uganda, just having those like early on discussions with our implementing partner, just to make sure that when we're branding the program, we brand it in a way that also appeals to men. And as Jackie was saying, just trying to avoid certain terminologies that might dissuade male engagement or male participation. So putting in those like neutral languages, so to speak, like branding it as a relationship improvement program as opposed to a violence against women prevention program. Yeah.
And it has helped to be faith leaders to be very intentional in how they schedule these sessions, right? Schedule sessions in a way that is going to be appealing for the men to attend. We wanted to track, and we identified 4 latent factors of what could steer impact, right? So the latent factors briefly were the faith leaders' competence, the attendance of couples, their gender progressiveness, and how the fidelity to the program. So we track these latent factors by doing random audits, by interviewing faith leaders before and after the intervention, being exposed to the intervention. We kept in touch with the faith leaders, again, to track how much of these 4 factors would be a steer to a larger impact. So what we learned when we mapped our data to these 4 latent factors, we learned that faith leaders who were more gender progressive had a larger impact than their peers.
We have seen in Uganda one possible way of ensuring that the program lasts for long or is sustainable is by integrating it into existing structures or existing programs of the implementing partner. So with our collaboration with World Vision, this is also what we're trying to explore. What are the existing programs? Which are the ones in which becoming one could be absorbed, and so I think this all is one way in which we can try to explore ways in which to respond to the learning question on sustainability.
One tip I can give for someone looking to adapt this for another context is to leverage on our learning around the gender progressive faith leaders, because for sure we know that working with gender progressive faith leaders is going to bring you more impact. Larger impact, especially if there is a question of cost. It would be cheaper to say, from the beginning to select faith leaders who are already gender progressive, so that you're sure of the larger effect you would get after that. But we are also testing and want to learn from exposing faith leaders to the program before they actually, implement it, not excluding any faith leaders, but rather having them exposed to the program before implementing it, having them train more, so that, maybe that translates into gender progressiveness.